Thank you for joining us, everybody. Before we kick off, I'd like to really try and set the scene. COVID aside, I think quite a few different forecasts have put programmatic display at the end of 2020, almost 90% of all display. Now that's enormous growth. And the reason it's growing so quickly is because it works, right? It works for advertisers. It enables them to extract a better ROI from their ad spend. And it's also working for publishers. It enables them to surface a stronger yield for their inventory. That said, the recent Isba report, coupled with various ICO reports, has put the practice of programmatic advertising under the spotlight once again. So I'd like to try and spend this time speaking to you guys about how you see the industry evolving, what we're doing from a technology perspective to make the supply chain more transparent, but also your general thoughts on the report and some of their findings. So, I mean, first off, were the findings of the recent Isba report a surprise to any of you guys?
I don't really think they were a surprise to anyone, Paul, who's been working in this space for any amount of time. I think there's been significant reports and investigations into the value chain and fees over, gosh, even going back 5, 6, 7 years. It's been a topic. I think there are certain elements of that were maybe maybe a little more surprising than others, and I'm sure we'll come in to talk about that. But I don't think as a whole, the fact that folks use programmatic and as part of that pay various elements of the value chain for their work seems right and fair to me, right? The platforms that they're using are adding value to their buys, and they are paying for that, and that does come out of the advertiser's budget. That's not surprising.
Okay, and Lucia, I mean, you guys as a platform have been pretty vocal about the practice of transparency over the years, and I think as well, correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys were involved in the initial report. I mean, is it something that you guys are always aware of, or is it something that maybe Isba didn't really get to the bottom of because they didn't have the right data to hand? It's not a criticism of those guys. The work that they've done with PwC is fantastic to try and bring this to the public consciousness, but many people are saying that it's not necessarily just 15% that's gone missing, it's 15% that wasn't accounted for because maybe, again, some of the insights weren't readily available to them. I mean, is that a fair statement?
Yes, we were involved. One of our clients have asked us to be part and kindly send their raw data to PwC, which we did immediately. It did not take much any extra processes or anything. We just got the approval, confirmation from the client. It's their data. So we are very, very vocal about the client owning their data and us providing granular raw data to all the clients that can set up ways of drilling into that data. It's one of our values as a company. And I think it's a great value as an independent Adtech solution as well, that we now are the ones that really can provide extra transparency and really connect the dots when it comes to audience and data in this industry.
Yeah, okay.
Unlike some. Yes, so the process is very simple. We were asked, please enable this as soon as possible. We did. And then PwC took it from there. Obviously, it's highly confidential in terms of what was analyzed. We didn't get a detailed, here's ad form, this is how you fed. But we assume, the account is managed with a very on the ball people. The account works really, seamlessly with the agencies that we work with on behalf of that account globally. So we don't anticipate any issues. We were asked only to provide DSP data. As you guys know, we are a DSP, a DMP, as well as an SSP. So in cases where we do have clients and they buy through our ad server and that flows into our SSP, if any of our clients, for example, were to try and think about replicating some of that, and they have publishers that are on our SSP, and you'd like to see that, the process wouldn't be very difficult, and there would be no issues in terms of data matching, because all data is raw data. Having said that, I think one of the recommendations from the report was for the industry to work together and to bring more standardization to data, and this is something that we highly support as well, because I mean, we are all in the same boat. We are in this business to provide value to our clients, to find a better way for our advertisers to do marketing and execute on their media dollars in a better, more valued way for them.
That's good to hear. And Chris, I mean, MediaMath, right? You guys have been around for a very long time. You've seen the different iterations of OpenRTB from point 1, point 2, point 3. You've seen the kind of explosive growth, right, across all formats. How are you guys looking at the report? How has it, impacted what you guys do on a day-to-day basis with your clients? What's your kind of take on where we're currently at?
Yeah, sure. So claims to supply chain is really nothing new to MediaMath. So back in 2018, early 2018, we launched our 2 hops initiative, where we removed a lot of the resellers from the supply chain. And that was a great way of reducing the non-value add resellers. We then, later that year, had an open letter to the SSPs, a code of conduct in which we state we'll not tolerate partners who are looking to game the auction mechanics, and that there are no lifetime memberships. We'll constantly be reevaluating who we are working with to ensure that value is being delivered throughout the supply chain to all parties involved. And then we've also gone on to support and drive adoption for industry initiatives like ads.txt, app ads.txt, supply chain objects, so it's JSON, the whole host of different initiatives throughout the industry. And that brings us to today. We're really pushing on the end-to-end supply chain transparency and making access to log level data that Lucia was talking about available to our clients, so they can own their data and then conduct further analysis on it.
Yeah, fair enough. And do you think, I mean, again, because the practice of programmatic can be quite complex, right? It's different technologies, different protocols, different standards. Doesn't mean that they're the actions of bad actors. It's just a very young ecosystem. Do we think that brands and advertisers fully understand the different nuances? The point I'm trying to get to, right, there is a clear differentiation between bad actors and undisclosed take versus technical discrepancies, ad serving discrepancies. I'm trying to really better understand, do we think within this 15% delta that Isba have thrown up, how much of that do we think is, genuine discrepancy versus undisclosed take?
Well, the foreign exchange piece actually really hits close to home, as we're constantly working with clients. Sometimes they have the programmatic specialists understand that programmatic is conducted or transacted in US dollar, but then there's also the conversion that takes place for the local currency. But their finance controllers deep within the organization on the infrastructure kind of back end side of the business may not understand that type of complexity within the programmatic ecosystem. And so when you look at the 15%, and then you're trying to count back of how could that happen, that's just one of the many ways that discrepancies exist.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense, because Katie, you're Ari, you're a co-founder and CEO, right? He put a big piece out in response to the initial findings, trying to explain the nuances of where discrepancies come from, and it isn't always the action of bad actors.
No, that's very true. I think that said, I think we're an industry that's about to go through a huge amount of change. I think the legacy pricing models where people are working on percentages leave it open for that sort of bad behavior to happen. I think we're increasingly seeing folks across all elements of the value chain switch to fixed fee models. Beeswax doesn't operate on a percentage of media model. We work on a fixed monthly fee basis based on the amount of tech utilization that we are doing on behalf of each of our customers. And we're increasingly seeing supply side platforms also moving to that sort of model. When you're in a fixed fee area, there's no chance of discrepancies creeping in. And so I think or it becomes a lot easier to isolate them. Are they down to general ad serving discrepancies? Are they down to ad blocking issues, to FX, to any number of sort of legitimate reasons? You can sort of piece that together. But if you know, and if you're able to see exactly what pieces are going to which of your partners, it then becomes a huge amount more transparent. And so I do think we are, we're still operating in like V1 of programmatic for most of the industry, and I think that's got to change in the next few years.
And I completely agree with you personally. And I think this report and various different headwinds like privacy and what's happening with the browsers and the deprecation of the cookies are going to change the practices, and they're going to change those practices for the better, I believe. Chris, you kind of referenced earlier some of the good work that programmatic vendors have been doing over the last 24 months when it comes to ads.txt, sellers.json, and all of the other really cool initiatives that have been pushed out by the IB Tech Lab. Mm-hmm. So it feels like we're already running 1,000 miles an hour to make the process better and more transparent for both those on the buy and sell side. However, there are still people that believe that now is probably a good time to look at blockchain technology and open source ledgers to really validate what tech vendors are doing. Now, depending on who you speak to, some people say, it's not a bad idea if somebody can validate what's happening with my ad dollars and they don't have a vested interest in buying or selling. That's probably some good insights. Others will say, look, there's no need for that intermediary. There's no need to add another layer, because if you ask the right questions, you can get transparency. It'd be interesting to hear your take on that, because I'm assuming you guys as execution platforms and DSPs, that's something that maybe your clients are starting to talk to you about, and whether or not you're going to be supporting those types of technology layers.
We're constantly exploring new technology for sure. We've looked into blockchain. We've looked into the existing capabilities. So yes, I do believe Adtech can kind of regulate itself, but it's going to take partnership and collaboration throughout the entire ecosystem here. Yeah. We're doing it already. We already have 15 different ecosystem partners and hundreds of publishers that are on board with this collaboration model that we built through our source initiative. But the last time I looked at Lumascape, we still have a lot more work to do in that regard. But as PwC saw, navigating the existing legal contracts is no joke. It took them 9 months from beginning to end across all the different participants in the study to actually begin the actual work they were set out to do. So ultimately, it really comes down to if transparency is a priority on that company's strategic roadmap. You can't just really just be a willing participant. You need to be enthusiastic evangelist for it. You need to be a champion for accountability in the supply chain. So that's really what it comes down to there is really the enthusiasm for it, and put a stake in the ground that transparency is what we will offer to our clients end to end.
Yeah, fair enough. And
I think a lot of brands are already, working with partners in this space, and it's very easy to always jump to the new buzzword to do things, and blockchain is a great way of doing this. Again, if a lot of your partners are working on that percentage model, and you want, one of the very clear recommendations from the report, both for the buy side and the sell side, is use your audit rights. Right. Mm-hmm. Again, at Beeswax, we'll share full auction logs, not just win logs or bid logs, but actual transparent auction logs of what bid requests were they receiving. If you can access those in real time through effectively a custom data lake, that takes away a lot of the heavy lifting. And again, if you've got that and you can audit at any time yourselves, yes, you might want a partner in to do it for you, and that may or may not be using a digital ledger technology. But I think the key thing is, per the report, really start to use those audit rights. I mean, it's so amazing to me, the amount of data that we share, but I think Beeswax is a little bit different, I think, for this, because it's a reason that a number of our customers work with us. But I do know from my experience elsewhere, quite often you would send a report, and if you put a tag in it to see has this report been opened, right, it would be very, very rare that anyone is actually auditing any numbers and any data that is shared. So
fair enough.
I would say, where you're having those rights put into contracts, use them.
Yeah, absolutely. And from an agency perspective, right, as DSPs, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming that the majority of your kind of commercial traction comes from the holding cos. How are they approaching transparency at the moment? Are they putting you guys under a lot more pressure, or are they coming to the table with more bespoke solutions that they want you to adopt? What does that kind of dynamic look like? Maybe Lucia, I mean, again, I know you guys work with a lot of the holding cos.
Yeah, we work with all holding groups globally. I would say that what the report highlighted is something that's in the top of mind of most agencies, because if you look at the challenge that they have a very expensive team to run, to be able to run all the activity on behalf of their clients, audit, making sure that they're keeping fraud out of the equation, making sure that they are buying the best impressions, et cetera, et cetera. That costs a lot of money. Yeah. There's dynamics that they have to deal with in regards to procurement, which doesn't always understand the complexity of a team that you need to have in place to run programmatically. Yeah. Then a lot of the budget and media that they actually control is already earmarked to go to partner 1, 2, 3, the top 3 media owners in the world. So they end up with a much smaller portion of that total amount of budget that they need to make it work for the advertiser. Yeah. And within that, that's where why the programmatic ecosystem lives. And I've seen initiatives from 3 at least holding groups to really fight to bring the publisher closer to the equation and to the advertiser, to really try and bypass many of those layers of fat in the middle. From our point of view, I think you either have to reduce the amount of complexity you have in your purchasing chain, or really understand it. Yeah. And having been a publisher in the past, I really, I was a publisher, and before that I was an advertiser. So I can see the challenge from multiple angles, and it's not an easy challenge and say, right, that those 15% were bad things, or those 50% it's going to somebody's pocket. It's not quite a simple answer to that. There are many hypotheses, and there are many nuances to this challenge, and to this challenge too.
Yeah, and I completely agree, right? And I guess the way I've structured some of these questions today is because I want viewers and I want people to understand that when they read these headlines in a trade press and national newspapers about ad technology removing 15% without anybody's permission, that is not always the case. Again, going back to those figures I quoted earlier, this is now going to be the way that almost 90% of all display advertising is transacted. Nobody is forcing advertisers to work with DSPs, and for those DSPs to work with SSPs, and those SSPs to work with publishers. Today, many global agency holding codes have relationship with publishers directly, but they choose to transact through ad technology, again, because of the efficiencies and the control that it gives them as buyers. And again, publishers support it because of the money they make from those pipes. I mean, do we think short term, people that don't fully understand the nuances of the ecosystem may be a little bit scared and go back to booking directly? Do we think there's going to be a flight back to IOs, or is it kind of horse bolted now and people see the efficiencies of programmatic?
I've heard chit chats about that, but what I would say is, when I said agencies are looking to work closer with publishers, and they always have worked closely with publishers,
of course,
in a programmatic environment as well as a direct environment. But I see them looking at avenues to work closer with them in a more transparent programmatic avenue. Yeah. So I can see quite a bit of innovation actually going on there, which is not my place to disclose, but I would say that the agencies are obviously in a very competitive market, and their advertisers are putting businesses to pitch way more often than before. Therefore, they have to sit in the room and show them something that validates their added value to the equation. And they are not sitting idle, or they are not necessarily operating in the way that they get blamed in their old ways, etc. I can't speak for all. I can't speak and say all agencies are wonderful. What they're doing is the future, etc. or not. But I do see some interesting innovations happening, and the agencies really trying to lead the way in a way, not just be I wouldn't say the victim of the narrative necessarily, I think that's too strong of a word, but to kind of be sided in the conversation because of them being the clients of the ad tech industry. But they're really trying to move the thinking a bit. And I think that's very positive. So what I would encourage is advertisers to really sit down with their agencies and understand their point of view on where the problems are. We are I mean, I can speak also for SSP, but this is not the topic today. We are DSPs here today. We are just one piece of the equation. And on the buy side, it's not just the DSP. There's the ad serving world as well that comes as part of this. But there is the other side of the equation. And my fear reading that report was, oh my God, publishers are going to get blamed and agencies are going to get blamed, and but without really an understanding of where that non-transparent activity may be happening. Having been a publisher, I've seen many examples of a transparent execution where maybe there is a reseller that isn't quite as transparent.
So do we think, Lucy, to your point there around, do we think that brands get a little bit smarter over the next 12 months? Not that they're not smart already, but maybe some of the people they've got in their teams haven't come from technology, ad tech companies or marketing technology solutions. Do we think maybe, again, because I've worked in this space, right, for 10 years, I've worked for publishers, DSPs, SSPs, and I feel pretty confident that if you ask the right questions, you work with the right partners, you understand the space, you can extract transparency today. It's the same as other sectors, right? If you go into the finance world and you don't understand finance, or if you want to build a building and you don't understand architecture, you're going to make mistakes and you're going to come across bad actors. That's the same for the ad tech sector, I truly believe. So the point I'm trying to articulate is, do we think that more brands hire in the expertise? Will it maybe expedite some of their plans in-house programmatic activation, or they still seek that guidance and kind of hand-holding from the agencies?
I mean, I think advertisers over the past 5-7 years have got a lot more educated about ad tech and the role of data within their business strategy as a whole. I do think that advertisers understanding exactly how this ecosystem works, or at least their digital teams at least, understanding through and through is their job to understand. So that it's important that they have a strong voice in the industry and also guide the market towards the goals that they want to achieve. I do think that it is positive that PwC and Isba have done this report, even though that the headlines are appearing a little bit too black and white, because anything that drives to a better understanding of the ecosystem, how we can move forward and add more value to all players is positive.
And I think,
but I think you're right. I think there's an element here of scaremongering. I mean, exactly to the point you're both making. It's very possible to operate programmatically at scale, fully transparently, and to have access to this data and know exactly what's going on. And I think to the question, are we going to see people moving back to IOs? I just don't think so. I think that's what certain people who've played the hype people on this report are perhaps hoping for. But in reality, it's amazing to grasp the scale that digital now is. When you look at when we were transacting on IOs 10 years ago, the internet was still so new. Internet penetration might have been 40-50%. Now, in most of the developed world, you're looking, even if you want to target one country, you're looking at billions of rows of data every single day. And so, and that data, those facts are all there. I think, obviously within this report, not every platform was involved and was able to share transparently. I think they only, the numbers that they've extrapolated, they extrapolated on 12% of the total impressions.
260 million impressions, 12% match. So it's still a very small sample size, completely.
And but I think, sorry, go ahead, Alex.
I was just going to say that 12% I found super interesting, because PwC wasn't able to actually get the log level data at the impression level throughout the supply chain. There were some instances where they were receiving aggregated data at the minute by minute or hour by hour, and then they had to match that data in an aggregated way, which also leads to that 15% missing in the supply chain, that unknown delta that they're referring to. And just when it comes to kind of in-housing, there's the IAB study back in 2019 where 86% of brands in Europe supposedly have in-housed at least partially some of their programmatic function. So it's not really a question of if or not if, but when. It's just also what functions will be the first to be in-housed. We've seen a number of increased requests for access to our log level data API over the years. We've seen that just go up and up and up. And that pushes out all the log level data from the impressions to the pixel logs to our client's own data warehouse. Our most sophisticated clients, we're actually pushing the bid opportunity to them, and they respond back with our custom bid router opportunity. So there's such a wide range of capabilities and sophistication across the clients that we're working with and the agencies that we're working with. It's just great to see kind of that innovation and collaboration take place.
Completely agree. And I think, Katie, you mentioned earlier about standards when it comes to data portability. You know, Chris, you guys were architects in the OpenRTB infrastructure years ago, you know, MediaMath being one of the first DSPs. Maybe we need to look collectively as an industry of trying to figure out if we could all adopt OpenRTB to support the buying and selling of programmatic impressions, how do we support a similar protocol that supports the transparent portability of data across both buy and sell side platforms? You know, we've proven that we can do it. We've proven that we can implement tools like ads.txt and sellers.json relatively quickly and easily. I think maybe that, you know, some of the barriers to adoption may be competitive advantages and disadvantages. It's how do we get past that and try and make sure that competitors work together to bring this level of transparency that the brands are now requiring of us, you know, and of our sector.
Right, and not just competitors from the DSP side, but also from the buy side to the sell side as well. So one of the things that we're doing with our new source initiative is that we actually have a new technical specification that we're working with on the SSP side in order to provide the impression level fee transparency and align on the latest impression counting mechanisms within OpenRTB. And again, that will reduce the discrepancies that we see between the buy and sell side. We're also working with SSPs to pass through actual goal type data. So publishers will receive the brand info, goals, and user level prediction of action. And then brands would actually receive back the cost transparency as well as auction results data. And so this reduces the discrepancies again, and it also reduces the total cost of ownership for the brands who are buying through the DSPs.
That's great to hear. And Katie, I was going to say earlier, when you was talking about, there are some people in the market, right, that say maybe we should be going back to IO because Adtech is bad. There's a ton of opacity. Everyone's crooks. But, you know, I can't think of many ad networks that offer full disclosure on their IOs. You know, agencies and brands have been working with ad networks for years. Now, there's nothing wrong with ad networks. If they deliver results and KPIs, you know, fantastic. But traditionally, that's been a non-disclosed model. Yet people have been happy to work with those particular vendors versus Adtech, where they expect so much granularity and insight. Again, because there's a perception, rightly or wrongly so, that there's a ton of bad actors in the Adtech space, but ad networks are absolutely fine to operate under an opaque business model.
Yeah, and I think this is really why this is a question for each brand, each advertiser to look at individually and decide, well, who do they want to partner with? What level of control do they want to have themselves? Do they want to have just their own contract? Do they actually want to have their own hands-on keyboard? Do they want to outsource this fully to an agency? Do they want their agency to be running through their trading desks? Do they want their agency to be booking through ad networks? As you say, there are so many different types of model that every brand has to weigh up the priorities that they have between their own control, their own transparency, their own flexibility, and based on where they want to be on those scales, they come up with the right solution for them. And I think we're at the point now, you know, to your intro, where digital is programmatic, and there are all of these different flavors. There isn't a simple sort of one size fits all. This is how everyone must do it. You know, some people do entirely want to have, you know, access to log level data and build their own algorithms. Other people don't want to know at all what's going on inside the black box. So that, you know, if you hit the performance metrics, off you go. And I think we're going to be operating in that spectrum where there is that huge range of different levels for a long time to come.
Yeah, and I think it's almost the perfect storm, right? This is from a setting perspective. We've just about got to the point in time when the tap of linear TV budgets are about to open up into the world of programmatic. Again, as I referenced earlier, we're having to change the way we track, attribute, manage frequency because of identity challenges and opportunities. So the ecosystem that we know it and operate in today is going to be completely re-architected. So again, anything we said today isn't in criticism of the Isba report. It's fantastic that they've surfaced those findings, but it is really, really important to make sure the market is aware of why they exist, whether or not they're the actions of bad actors, whether or not they're the output of an ecosystem that is still pretty much in its infancy and isn't yet fully aligned, because there's a ton of interoperability issues when it comes to data sharing.
Paul, I'm sure we're going to get a lot of questions on this from the audience as well.
I suspect so. But I mean, and again, lastly, just to finish up my side, I mean, some of the things that programmatic can do for buyers and sellers. Again, we've talked about the huge growth. Almost all formats will be transacted in an automated and programmatic way. 2 or 3 words from each of you. Why is that? What is programmatic offering that maybe direct buying and selling by the insertion order isn't? Lucia?
Well, the universe today versus 10 years ago is very different. It allows you to genuinely have a more sophisticated approach on the engagement you have with each consumer of yours. And GDPR, being part of it, and compliance and all, still you do have the ability to really put in front of each user something very unique. Not that everybody kind of has got to the point of being very sophisticated in that front, but it brings efficiencies in every piece of the pie. It is complex. Yeah. It is a subject matter that requires very talented individuals to run it well for you. But if you can do it well, it's a different world than a world where you just bought, from 10 publishers and networks and just maximize the amount of impressions you got. So I don't think there is ever a way to go back there without necessarily reducing the amount of value you gain from it.
Yeah, completely agree. Chris?
I would go with the ownership. So not just when it comes to your data and your contracts, but also the incremental knowledge that you're gaining from being more intimately involved with how your campaigns are executed. So ownership is what I would kind of say is the difference between programmatic versus the direct IO bookings.
Okay. Katie?
I think sorry to be boring on a panel, but really just to kind of echo what both Chris and Lucia have said. I think it comes down to that effectiveness, that efficiency, and that control at scale. And it's the scale that makes it all really, really meaningful as well, because it would just be impossible to carry out to transact with all of these people in a more manual process way.
I completely agree, and I know it sounds like a question that we would have asked a panel maybe 9 years ago, but we find ourselves asking again in 2020 because I think a lot of viewers will be saying they're all crooks, it doesn't work, go back to insertion order. But personally, I mean, if I was asked that question as well, I'm pretty similar to you, Katie and Chris. It's as we get more screens and we move into smarter cities, and the opportunity to serve targeted ads to people quantifies to huge numbers. I think understanding exactly what % of your advertising spend works is extremely important to buyers. And without technology, without data, without insights, they're not going to be able to make those smart and informed decisions as the ad landscape just, massively explodes over the next several years. But guys, thank you very much for joining. I know it's a tricky subject to navigate. There's going to be a lot of questions, I suspect, but I'm feeling really positive that the findings will hopefully drive us to a more transparent future. There's a ton of innovation happening in our space at the moment, and I'm really excited to be working in programmatic in 2020. So thank you very much.